Good morning. Today is Wednesday, October 26, 2022. This is the Urban Hope Refuge Morning Devotions. We're continuing our reading today from the 2022 Daily Bible Reading Guide, which is published by the American Bible Society. For the month of October, we are reading under the theme, God's renewing word of peace and justice. Today, we are reading from Deuteronomy chapter 19, verses 1 through 21 in the New International Version. That's Deuteronomy chapter 19, verses 1 through 21. Excuse me, early morning can have a challenge on that throat. So the sub-theme is cities of refuge. Verse 1. When the Lord your God has destroyed the nations whose land he is giving you, and when you have driven them out and settled in their towns and houses, then set aside for yourselves 3 cities in the land the Lord your God is giving to you to possess. Determine the distances involved and divide into 3 parts the land the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, so that a person who kills someone may flee for refuge to one of these cities. This is the rule concerning anyone who kills a person and flees there for safety. Anyone who kills a neighbor unintentionally without malice aforethought. For instance, a man may go into the forest with his neighbor to cut wood, and as he swings his axe to make a tree fall, the head may fly off and hit his neighbor and kill him. That man may flee to one of those cities and save his life. Otherwise, the avenger of blood might pursue him in a rage, overtake him if the distance is too great, and kill him even though he is not deserving of death, since he did it to his neighbor without malice aforethought. This is why I command you to set aside for yourselves 3 cities. If the Lord your God enlarges your territory, as he promised on oath to your ancestors, and give you the whole land, he promised then, because you carefully follow all these laws I command you today, to love the Lord your God and to walk always in obedience to him, then they are to set aside 3 more cities. Do this so that innocent blood will not be shed in your land, which the Lord your God is giving you as your inheritance, and so that you will not be guilty of bloodshed. But if out of haste someone lies, verse 11 again, but if out of hate someone lies in wait, assaults, and kills a neighbor, and then flees to one of these cities, the killer shall be sent for by the town elders, be brought back from the city, and be handed over to the avenger of blood to die. Show no pity. You must purge from Israel the guilt of shedding innocent blood, so that it may go well with you. Do not remove your neighbor's boundary. Verse 14. I'm too excited. Verse 14. Do not move your neighbor's boundary stone, set up by your predecessors in the inheritance you received in the land the Lord your God is giving you to possess. That was verse 14. Something, witnesses. One witness is not enough to convict anyone accused of any crime or offense that they may have committed. A matter must be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If a malicious witness takes the stand to accuse someone of a crime, the 2 people involved in the dispute must stand in the presence of the Lord before the priest and the judges who are in office at that time. The judges must make a thorough investigation, and if the witness proves to be a liar, giving false testimony against a fellow Israelite, then do to the false witness as that witness intended to do to the other party. You must purge the evil from among you. The rest of the people will hear of this and be afraid, and never again will such an evil thing be done among you. Show no pity. Life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. This concludes our reading for today of Deuteronomy chapter 19, verses 1 through 21 in the New International Version. Chapter 19 of Deuteronomy begins with the dividing of the land for the children of Israel. Another part of this chapter that I just read about is on witnessing. You can't sentence one to death with only witness, because the scripture further says, at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses would a matter be established. And the last part of this chapter, if a false witness came up against a man to testify against him, both the one who brought the accusation and the one that is accused will have to stand before the Lord. Listen to this. The scripture said they will stand before the Lord, and that is done through the priest and the judges. I want to, in the minutes that I have left, I want to focus on verse 14. dealing with the land. And it says in verse 14, don't steal land from your neighbor by moving the boundary marker your ancestors put in place. Each person's property is an inheritance from the Eternal, who's giving you this land to live in. And the reason I want to deal with verse 14 is because that verse deals with the land that we've been talking about ever since we've been reading in these Old Testament scriptures. The land. Remember, Zelophehad's daughters, and the fact that no land was due them according to the law because they had no brother. The land. The reason this is so important is because it deals with the nature of man. God gave these instructions that we read in this chapter to Moses before the Israelites entered into the promised land. And the reason that God did that is because God knows the nature of man. This is so important. What is meant by the nature of man? When God first created man, he placed him in a perfect environment. The whole earth belonged to man, with the exception of the fruit of one tree. And God warned Adam of the consequences of disobedience. And I won't take the time to read the scripture, but it's in Genesis chapter 2, verses 16 and 17. But the fact of the matter is that Adam failed the test. Now God told him, the day that you eat of the fruit of this tree, you will surely die. Listen, this is so important for us to understand that physical death did not occur when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They did not die physically, but spiritual death occurred immediately. Adam's spirit died the instant he ate. But the scripture tells us that his body lived for 930 years. You can find that in Genesis chapter 5, verse 5. Now, very recently, in the past few days, we read in the book of Numbers that God told the generation of Jews that he rescued from Egypt. He told them, you're going to die in the wilderness because you refuse to trust me and to take possession of the land I promised Abraham. Listen, the children of Israel didn't die as soon as they spoke these words, as soon as God spoke these words. But over the course of 40 years, they died spiritually. They were gone, turning their back against God, backsliding from God with these idol gods consistently. So God knew the reason he had Moses giving these instructions to them before they crossed over into the promised land was because God knew that it wouldn't take long for them to forget his rules and start living by their own standards instead of his. God knew the nature of man because he created man. God knew that the people needed reminders like this one that we just described to keep them on the narrow path that was different, a different path from the one that others would follow. Let me close. My time is up. While everyone else looked after number one, God wanted his people to look after each other and to honor each other's property. God wanted his people to understand that the land, the possessions, really did not belong to the people. He only let them borrow it while they lived, but it really belonged to God. That's a great lesson for us, even today. All of our possessions belong to God. He allows us to borrow them. I pray that these words bless you today, and you know it. I challenge you to pray your way through the day, walk with the King, and be a blessing.